delighted to be here. My colleague with the Small Business Administration asked me to address the topic, the harmonized system. So I'm happy to explain this topic to your audience. The harmonized system is a numbering system. It's kind of like a social security number. It explains what the exporter's product is. And it helps people who are not familiar with your product understand what you're selling. It is a unique classification system, and it's used primarily because customs officials at the overseas ports of import are not as familiar with your product as you are. With everyone using the same numbering system, it can help your product perhaps be understood before it's allowed into that country. So, with everyone using the same songbook, I call it the songbook, we can watch the flows of goods in and out of countries. I used to sell industrial biochemicals and food products to about 63 countries. And way back then, we had numbering systems that were different all around the world. There was the Customs Cooperation Council nomenclature and the European Customs Cooperation Council nomenclature, and there was the Canadian tariff systems. There was the Brussels tariff nomenclature, which a lot of people were confused by, and of course we in the United States had our Schedule B codes. So sadly, everyone around the world was calling a product something different because everyone had a different book that they looked in to try to figure out what that number stood for. And there were a lot of trade disputes over what the heck your product was. And also, I had a lot of representatives and distributors around the world. And I can't tell you how often one of my distributors overseas would say, hey, I know that this is a biochemical that's used in medicine, but I would like for you to classify it totally different from what it is, because why? So we can get it into our country and pay less duty for it. So they were asking me essentially to lie when I was in the private sector. Of course, I refused to, because I knew how important it was for everybody to understand what I was shipping and what I offered the world. I wanted the buyer to know. I wanted their receiving customs house broker to know. I wanted the insurance company who was insuring my shipment to know. And I wanted everybody in the world to realize what I sold. So it's very important for me. And also, of course, I think it in the long run really mitigates having any problems with your shipments if you do classify your product properly. Anyway, so it was like in the late 1980s when the whole world decided, hey, there's this proposal for us to get on board with this harmonized system, this numbering system to describe what products were. Strangely enough, it was way back in the 1950s that the Europeans proposed the harmonized system. The 1950s, the Europeans had this great idea that we all needed to use the same numbering system. And it wasn't really until, again, the late 1980s with the Omnibus Trade Bill that the United States finally started voting on whether or not to get on board with this numbering system so that we could classify products. It was a different system than the SIC codes. Everybody usually used to use standard industrial classification codes, which was a numbering system back then that was just simply used to define certain industry sectors in the United States. And I think that was a system.